The Shift is brought to you by SE Healthcare. Welcome to The Shift. I'm Dr. Andrea Coyle. Welcome back, Shifties, to the next episode of the Shift podcast. I'm really thrilled to introduce a newfound friend, someone that we really had a meaningful connection within 5 minutes. I'm going to have Fred introduce himself because he does so many wonderful things. I don't want to leave anything out. Fred, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, Andrea, thanks so much for having me. And, at Newfound Friends, we were newfound friends because we were introduced through Alyssa Adams. So I want to give that shout out early and often. So Alyssa, thank you for making this introduction. It was actually really meaningful as we had a conversation well in advance of this podcast recording. So thanks so much. Yeah, my name is Fred Neis. I am a registered nurse. I have been a nurse for 32 years now. I also have a master's degree in nursing administration, and I have done a myriad of things, both clinically and in business. And clinically, I've worked in emergency departments and ICUs and for a LifeFlight helicopter service here in the Midwest, and then eventually took on some formal leadership roles, title leadership roles as clinical manager and as a director within some large health systems. And then made the pivot about 20 years ago into corporate America and worked for the advisory board company for 11 and a half years. And it's really was a great training ground for me. I got exposure to really understanding kind of the broad spectrum of how healthcare actually works today and maybe how it needs to do a whole lot of things differently. And then I got an opportunity to work for some time with a healthcare payer and kind of understand that part of the arc of the healthcare spectrum. And then most recently, I launched my own company, AdvisorRN. And I did that because I really wanted to be able to take a step out and start to have the conversations that I think sometimes I didn't want to have when I still worked in corporate America. I wanted to say things out loud and start making changes and do things a little bit more innovatively, because what we're doing today is not working for our healthcare system and the people we serve and the staff that are delivering the care. So yeah, so I'm really excited.
I love it, Fred. And we're just gonna kind of riff back and forth.
Yeah.
Easy conversation with the Shifties, but as you know, Fred, SE Healthcare, the company that's sponsoring the podcast, I'm so grateful for them. It's a company that's a startup, laser focused on identifying or helping organizations identify root causes of burnout, and then offering tools and resources that are evidence-based that helps manage burnout. And as we know, burnout's fundamentally not a problem. It is a dilemma. We talk about that all the time. I'm just curious, Fred, in your really amazing career, when was the first time or what event happened that triggered something in you that maybe it was compassion fatigue or maybe the way something was handled didn't work out best and then it contributed to some burnout? Do you have any of those you'd like to share? I'm sure we all do, but do you have one that really sticks out?
After about 30 years, we probably any of us have probably accumulated a few stories here and there. I've got a couple that come to mind, and I think about them in the context in a multitude of contexts, right? I think about, wow, it may have started, some of the burnout that I may have experienced, and it probably vacillates over time in terms of enthusiasm and excitement. And then, it's also what would I do differently if I had been a leader in those scenarios, how, and all too often, I would imagine you hear it as well. Those of us who've done this for a period of time say, wow, I really wish I had that set of tools back when I was a leader or an early careerist and needed those tools to actually change the way we were doing healthcare. All right, so I'm going to tell this. This is a story that it may make me cry. I'm going to warn your listeners right now. I tell this story every once in a while. It's hard to tell because that's probably what will happen. So I was working as a flight nurse. It was near the Christmas holiday, so this was a while ago. And we got called on a motor vehicle crash late one evening. and we landed in a field down in the southern part of Kansas City. And as we got out, it's always the unique care environment that we worked in at the time. The fire department had to get us access over a fence, and it took us a few minutes to get towards the ambulance. And as we got into the ambulance, there were two children in the back of the ambulance. One of them was on the stretcher, and the other one was sitting up. And the paramedic looked at me and said, "I'm going to need some help. I've never worked a pediatric code in the field before." And I said, "We've got this. We will help you. My partner and I are here to help. Let's go to work." And we went to work. It turned out, even despite all of the work that we did, and we executed flawlessly. I will tell you that the care we delivered was exceptional that night. We did everything in our power, and it didn't work out. And the story was that the two girls, turns out they were identical twins, were in the minivan with mom on the way to grandma and grandpa's house, and they were just a few miles away. And one of them got overly excited, like kids do, and got out of her seat. And mom turned around to say, "Get back in your car seat. We're almost there." And she unfortunately lost control and crashed the minivan. And this little girl died. And her little sister effectively was unharmed because she was still in her seatbelt. And it was awful, and it was devastating. And we had to tell the mom when she got to the hospital, because she was, of course, unharmed as well. Not of course, but she was unharmed as well. And we had to sit there, and I was with the emergency medicine physician to have to break the news to mom and the rest of the family. And it was probably one of the toughest calls I've ever run in my career. And my partner, I think, felt the exact same way. With it was the whole intersection of, it was the holiday season. It was supposed to be joyous. There's this little girl, and, this shouldn't have happened. And then she had a twin, like an identical twin. So you had, an identical twin standing next to the other one who wasn't in the same condition. And, as I reflect on that whole evening, while it was late in the evening, it was still evening, and we still had more hours in our shift to go. And I wish someone had just said to me, "How are you doing?" No one said that to us at the time. Didn't say it to me, didn't say it to my partner, didn't say it to the pilot. And it had to have been hard on all of us. And we missed an opportunity. And I would say, in some ways, as leaders, and not to fault them, many moons ago. However, I don't think we've changed that much in all of these years. We're having the same issues today as we had back then. Someone should have intervened at that moment, and things should have been done very differently. And I would do things very differently today if I were a leader in that scenario.
And I think, Fred, first of all, thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for sharing that story. You told me that story about 3 weeks ago, and I can still hear you telling the story, and I can envision it in my head. And I mean, just thank you and your team for all that great work you delivered that particular night. And probably we have nurses all over the world doing that every day, probably as we're speaking. That's why our profession is so powerful. I feel like there are often times when we think about people first and human-centered leadership. And do you happen to know KV? She used to work at the advisory board.
Who?
Dr. Catherine Vitarikis. I might be not pronouncing her name, but
I know the name. Yeah, I know
KV.
the name. Mm-hmm.
She's going to be a shifty in a couple weeks. But she and I were discussing the human experience. And at the end of the day, sometimes in all the chaos of our lives as healthcare providers and healthcare leaders, we forget about the human experience. And it's at that moment where some people are, what's the use? Lack of self-efficacy. What's the use? I tried so hard. I delivered flawless resuscitation, and this poor child still did not survive. That contributes to burnout. And I feel like when I speak with leaders all across the country, every time I have these discussions, you and I continue to connect dots for people. Because some people don't really recognize that's part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're still saturated in some ways around, oh, tech is going to solve our problems, and yet you're right. This is a human touch business, and this is a human connection business that we work in. And tech will be a great enabler for a whole lot of things. People still want that human connection at the end of the day. And it's vitally important that we get it right.
I agree. And it's, that's what's so great about SC Healthcare is we create this culture of burnout awareness and management. And, hopefully this particular episode, we're going to reach people, and people are going to reach out to us and say, first of all, thanks for sharing that story. And thank you for this medium. We started talking a little bit about chief nursing officers and the incredible work that they do, and also the incredible challenges that they have in those very difficult roles. Would you like to share some of your discussions that you've had with chief nursing officers? And, burnout might look and feel a little different for the chief nurse than the nurse that's actually delivering care in the field or in the hospital environment.
Yeah, I think it's different for all of us, right? And part of that's probably the position in which we occupy at that time and the responsibilities that we have. In the conversations that I've had recently with chief nursing officers, they have an incredible plate spinning exercise that is essentially something that they're almost put into a full failure position. There's no real way to easily execute their job. Chief nursing officers tend to have the largest workforce that they have to deal with and manage. They've got the pressures that, tends to be the perceptions of it's just the largest expense on the ledger rather than a revenue generator. And then there's all the other pressures that go around with certifications, licensure, culture, the human experience, the consumer experience, the clinical care, the safety. And in healthcare, I heard the statistic, and I'm going to imagine that it's true. Healthcare is the second most heavily regulated industry in the nation, and it is second only to nuclear waste disposal.
I was going to say that's probably what.
Yeah. And I've carried that with me because I think about all of the regulatory environment, the expectations that are placed upon a chief nursing officer, and the fact that it's a 24/7 operation, which is also a unique leadership position to be in. And as well, I don't know if we support chief nursing officers in the ways that we really should support someone who is managing such a large workforce proportionately to the organization in total, as well as all of the other features that go with that job. And so in my conversations with them, it's the hours, it's a lot of the HR issues, it's a lot of the economic factors that go with this. We've got to stick to a hard and fast hours per patient day or an hours per patient visit, and they're having difficulty either both breaking the cycle as well as getting themselves in a position where they can be strategic and innovative and really restart the way that we should be delivering care within the nurse or enterprise. And they just, they're constantly putting up fires and trying to solve the problem that's in front of them at that moment, rather than being able to do what we enable traditionally other executives to be able to do.
I love what you just said, Fred. It's about the strategic and innovative initiatives. And that's what really fuels people's fire, their inspiration. Like people that get into healthcare obviously want to help people. And then when you step into a leader role, you want to help the people taking care of the people. And that requires strategy and innovation. And when you're going meeting to meeting, back to back, and you don't have time to do that, that starts to kind of chip away, because that's your joy, and it chips away at your joy, and that contributes to burnout often, not always, because as we both said, burnout's different for everyone. You know, Fred, what we typically do at the end of the episode is we give 2 or 3 takeaways that would be really helpful for the shifties. Do you mind sharing 1 or 2?
Yeah, yeah. I'm happy to do that. And then I want to volley back to you a little bit because
Okay.
this is my opportunity too to be curious and learn. So,
Okay.
in all fairness of the banter, I want to, I'd love to ask a question or two as well. I think as I think about like the calls to action, as a nurse, I think some of it starts with each one of us. And one of the things is that words matter. And so I think about the scenario that it happened to me when I was working clinically as well. At shift change, the incoming team, hey, how'd the shift go? And you'd say things like, man, you don't want to get in there, man, you don't want to go in there. And not only does that already set up that negative moment, think about who might hear that along with your colleagues who know a little bit more about the reference and the colloquial way we talk about it. Think about if you said that as you were walking out into the middle of a waiting room and people heard that don't understand healthcare whatsoever or the reference behind it. So words are really, really important. So how do we use words to communicate and lead, whether we're a staff nurse, the charge nurse, the nurse manager, the chief nursing officer? Words are really important. I think the other thing that would be a call to action, and it's different for everyone, is I've come to realize that I don't think about life as a work-life balance anymore. And I think about life as just life. And how do I want to live it? How do I want to define it? How do I want to have a story and a brand out there? And it's all together. So I infuse my 6-year-old into the conversations periodically just for fun. It makes for a great story because he's cute, and me as a professional, also me as the guy who wants to go do fun things. Like, what do I enjoy? And so my call to action for all the nurses on your podcast and all your listeners is go find some things that truly fill your soul and get committed to doing them. Truly get embedded in doing that. And as a CNO or a director or a formal leader within a health system, support them. And one of the things around burnout that I think we can find out as one of the indicators is staff sometimes don't feel like they've got a connection to their leader. And so here's a little bit of a pro tip for those leaders. As you learn about something personal about those folks that you're leading, put it in your notes. So I have in my contacts personal information about individuals and what they like or their dog's name, and help try to make those personal connections then when you interact with them again so that they have that human connection. So those would be a couple of my call to actions and a side pro tip while I'm at it from a leadership perspective.
Those are great. Those are great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So I'd be curious, volley back to you. I'd be curious as you think about burnout a little bit. Burnout is different for everyone, and it's different based on kind of their years of experience, potentially their age, as well as where they sit within the organizational hierarchy. So, what are a couple of things that you found around burnout that you want to share?
Thank you for asking, and I'm going to be honorable I'm going to be humble, vulnerable, and very transparent. I worked in an organization where I was furloughed during the COVID pandemic. And I felt, and it was early on in the pandemic, and I felt very devalued. And it was not a good feeling. And then I went up and worked as an assistant director in a New York City suburb hospital during the first wave of the pandemic. Uncertainty, New York, as we all know, was hit really hard. And it was supposed to be a 6-week contract, Fred, and it turned out to be 6 months.
Oh.
And I saw a lot of stuff that we obviously all read about. And then when I came back to the organization, my office had been moved, my parking place had been moved, and this was a place that had furloughed me. And I fell into the grips of burnout because I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel like my voice was being heard. And what happened to me, and everyone experiences burnout, but I was the one who was cynical and critical. You know, some people get that emotional exhaustion or lack of self-efficacy. What's the use? Mine was cynical and critical, almost to the point where I look back at myself because I'm able to reflect, and I was definitely not at my best. And I did not display my best. And what would happen is I would be at work, not at my best. And then I would go home and reflect on me not being my best. And then I'd be a big critic of my own behavior. And it created this vicious cycle that was actually crippling. And it was at that point that someone from SE Healthcare reached out to me and said, would you like to develop some content around burnout? And I started writing it down.
Yeah.
It was incredibly therapeutic. I learned a lot through the micro learnings that SE Healthcare has. And it really started my journey of healing. And so when they say a gratitude journal is evidence-based, it truly is. And then SE Healthcare offered me a job as their Chief Clinical and Innovation Officer. So everything happens for a reason. But I mean, I have many examples of burnout, but that was one of my most aha moments of, wow, burnout really brought the worst out in me. And I don't ever want to get to that point. So for me, that's why I think it's really important for you and me and all the guests that come on the shift that we recognize what burnout looks like, sounds like, feels like, so that we can continue to be our best. Because I don't want people, when people aren't their best and they're delivering care, there's nothing good comes out of that. I'm truly on a mission to help people recognize these signs and symptoms so that they can then be the best. Because don't we just want everyone to be the best, truly?
Yeah. I think for your shifties who are listening to this podcast, this was completely unscripted. None of this question was not rehearsed whatsoever, and Andrea didn't know it was coming. So not only do I appreciate the genuineness of it, you know, the illustration of being undervalued, right? Like I told a story where I just needed somebody to catch me. And in your case, it was different, yet the end result was relatively the same, which is it results in burnout. And so how do we identify those themes earlier for each one of us and then have someone intercept us? Because, you know, as you kind of wrap that up, we're a high performance team. We've got to think about us. We say this all the time. Healthcare is a team sport. It is a team sport, and it requires each one of us to know our positions and play them well. You know, be completely nourished and, you know, physically and mentally ready every time we get into that game. And, you know, that, you know, we wouldn't tolerate this, or as sports fans, we wouldn't tolerate this of our teams if all of a sudden they started to crumble around us because people weren't taking care of them. And, you know, even the best coaches have coaches. Even the best coaches have people to catch them. So yeah, I really appreciate the teamness. We've got to have teams, and we've got to have folks take care of each other every day. Yeah.
And you know, Fred, thank you for saying that, because I'm a big sports fan as well. I think the call to action that I would say is be there to lift up anyone that's special to you. If we talk about the workspace, obviously your peers in the workspace, or even anybody in the workspace, but be there to lift one another up, and then recognize that sometimes it's okay to not be okay and be vulnerable. I feel like this medium, Fred, is getting us to a place where we can start having these conversations, because people often feel like burnout, depression, anxiety, any mental health condition is, oh, we can't talk about it. Let's not talk about it. Talking about it actually humanizes each and every one of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're in the right season to be proactive around this. And it starts with each one of us.
Right.
And I'm committed to that, because we can all say, oh, there are these outside factors that are contributing to my burnout. It does start with each one of us. And this is the season right now as we record this, where we get an entire new set of teammates, right? It's July 1st coming up. And it's, as I said in a post earlier today on LinkedIn, it's like clockwork. And every year we get brand new teammates. We get new nurses, we get new physicians, we get new respiratory therapists, new pharmacists, new physicians. And all too often, it still happens today. We have teammates who will say, oh, they're coming, they're just going to get in the way, and they don't know what they're doing. And I would challenge everybody to change that algorithm. I really would. We should welcome every single one of these people on our team. They're committed to our mission. They dedicated themselves to this mission. And these are the folks who are going to help us. And they expect us to take care of them. They're going to, we expect them to take care of us. And we should do this every single day. We should be welcoming them, not suggesting they're about to get in my way or slow me down. Because as you and I have talked before, and as a perennial conversation, we're short-staffed. Well, we possibly are short-staffed in one way because we treated people that way.
That's a really good point. It's almost a mic dropper, actually. So we're going to wrap up this episode, Fred, but I really want to invite you to come back.
All right. I'd love to.
I want you to come back. We'll continue the dialogue. We'll find other things to talk about. Maybe we'll talk about sports next time, but I always end up with this, Fred. Shifties, remember, your shift makes a difference, so keep shifting. Enjoying the shift? Help us reach more nurse leaders by rating and reviewing us on your podcast app. It takes just a minute, but makes a big impact. Search for The Shift, tap those stars, and share what you love. Your feedback shapes our future episodes and helps others discover us. Remember, rate, review, and amplify The Shift today.